You type the Scramble for Africa into a search bar. The screen floods with results. They all show the same story: a continent divided, claimed, and controlled in one of the fastest land grabs in human history. But then, you notice a question that none of these videos dare to answer. What if the Scramble for Africa never happened? What if those borders were never drawn? What if the great kingdoms and empires of Africa continued their rise without foreign rule stopping them in their tracks? How different would the continent be today? Its nations, its languages, its power, its place in the world. This is not fantasy. This is a grounded, historical reconstruction. And in this video, we imagine the Africa that might have emerged if its destiny had never been taken away. But before we imagine that alternate world, we need to understand what actually happened. Let's take 30 seconds to summarize the series of videos about the Scramble for Africa. By the late 19th century, European powers were racing for territory. Industrial nations wanted resources, new markets, and strategic control across global trade routes. The turning point came in 1884 at the Berlin Conference, a meeting where European leaders, without a single African representative, formalized their claims over the continent. In the decades that followed, the map changed with astonishing speed. By the start of the First World War, over 90% of Africa was under European colonial rule. Only Liberia and Ethiopia remained independent. Colonization reshaped nearly everything: political systems, economic structures, and even the borders of states that had existed for centuries. Artificial boundaries cut across cultures and languages. You can see straight borders, or strangely shaped borders like this. Indigenous institutions were disrupted or replaced, and new administrative systems were built to extract resources, not to develop local prosperity. This is the world we actually inherited. Africa in the 18th and early 19th centuries was not an empty map waiting to be claimed. It was a continent of kingdoms, empires, and complex political systems that had grown and evolved for centuries. Across West Africa, the Asante Empire controlled a powerful network of gold production, trade, and diplomacy. The Sokoto Caliphate, founded in 1804, became one of the largest states in Africa, stretching across parts of today's Nigeria, Niger, and northern Cameroon. Nearby, kingdoms like Dahomey and the waning but still influential Oyo Empire played major roles in regional politics. In Central Africa, the Kongo Kingdom had a long history of organized governance and external trade. The Luba and Lunda states developed sophisticated political structures, with networks that reached deep into the interior. Across East Africa, the Edi Empire remained a strong, centralized state with its own written language, religious institutions, and military power. Along the Indian Ocean coast, cities like Kilwa, Mombasa, and Zanzibar thrived as commercial hubs, connecting Africa with Arabia, India, and beyond. In the Great Lakes region, kingdoms such as Buganda, Rwanda, and Burundi maintained well-organized monarchies with tax systems and standing armies. And in southern Africa, the Zulu kingdom, shaped by the rise of Shaka in the early 1800s, expanded into a dominant regional force. Sotho and Swana polities developed centralized leadership structures. Off the African mainland, the Merina Kingdom on Madagascar was modernizing rapidly and establishing unified control over the island. This was the political landscape before colonization swept across the continent. And it is from this real, documented history that our alternate timeline must begin. If the Scramble for Africa never happened, the borders we see today would be entirely different. Because the map of Africa would not be a patchwork of straight lines drawn in European capitals. It would reflect the rise and fall of African states themselves, their alliances, their trade routes, and their historical influence. So let's imagine that political map, based only on what we know from real history. In West Africa, the Sokoto Caliphate would likely remain one of the region's strongest powers. By the mid-1800s, it already controlled vast territories across today's northern Nigeria, Niger, and northern Cameroon. Without colonial intervention, its federated structure could evolve into a larger, more centralized state. Further south, the Asante Empire continues its expansion across Akan-speaking regions. Its political organization, military strength, and gold-based economy gave it the potential to unify much of what is now southern Ghana and surrounding areas. Along the coast, states like Dahomey and Benin were already adopting firearms and military reforms through trade. In this alternate world, they modernize further and maintain control of their territories instead of being absorbed by colonial powers. Across the Horn and East Africa, the Ethiopian Empire remains a major regional power. Its centralized monarchy, long-standing institutions, and strategic access to the Red Sea position it to expand further or form regional alliances with neighboring states. Along the Swahili Coast, cities such as Mombasa, Zanzibar, and Kilwa were already linked through Indian Ocean commerce. In a world without colonization, these city-states could form a maritime confederation, a trading bloc with influence stretching from Somalia down to Mozambique. In the Great Lakes region, the Buganda Kingdom continues its rise. With its administrative structure and strong local economy, it had the capacity to develop into a modern constitutional monarchy with significant regional influence. Moving into the interior, the Luba and Lunda states were connected by networks of trade and shared political systems. These could evolve into a large inland federation spanning parts of today's DRC and surrounding regions. In southern Africa, the legacy of the Mfakane period creates two dominant spheres, a powerful Zulu-aligned bloc and a strong Sotho-Tswana group. Instead of being fragmented by colonial boundaries, these polities consolidate into regional powers. Just across the ocean, the Marina Kingdom in Madagascar was already modernizing and establishing island-wide control. Without foreign intervention, it almost certainly becomes a stable and influential state in the Southwest Indian Ocean. Add all of this together, and Africa no longer has 54 countries. Instead, we see perhaps 25 to 35 states, larger, more cohesive, and shaped by real historical lines of culture, trade, and political power. And this alternate political map forms the foundation for everything that comes next. If the borders of Africa evolved naturally, its languages would evolve naturally too. Because long before colonization, the continent already had powerful regional lingua francas. In an Africa without the scramble, these languages would grow even stronger. Across East Africa, Swahili would likely become one of the continent's most widespread languages. It already connected the Swahili Coast from Somalia to Mozambique, linking inland markets to the Indian Ocean trade world. Without colonial borders breaking these ties, Swahili could extend deeper into Central Africa and the Great Lakes. In West Africa, Hausa was already a major trade language used across the Sahel. Its reach stretched far beyond the borders of the Sokoto Caliphate. In this alternate timeline, Hausa becomes an even stronger regional lingua franca for commerce and administration. Alongside it, languages such as Yoruba and Akan maintain influence through the strength of their states in the south. Across the Horn of Africa, Amharic continues as the language of the Ethiopian state. With Ethiopia remaining independent and potentially expanding its influence, Amharic remains a major regional language with deep institutional roots. And to the north, Arabic remains the dominant language across North Africa and the Sahel, shaping religion, scholarship, and trans-Saharan trade. European languages would still appear in trade, diplomacy, and education, but they would not become the official languages of most African states. Instead, Africa becomes one of the world's strongest multilingual regions, built around indigenous languages that were already thriving long before colonization. To imagine Africa's economic future without the scramble, we have to return to the economic realities that already a stick deficit before colonization. Because Africa was not isolated. It was connected to global trade networks that stretched from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean to the Middle East and beyond. And in a world without partition, those networks only grow stronger. Before 1880, Africa's economies were built on gold, ivory, ironworking, textiles, agriculture, and livestock. These goods moved along well-established trade routes, across the Sahara, down the Nile, through the Great Lakes, and along the Swahili Coast. States taxed trade, protected routes, and built wealth through regional exchange, not extraction by foreign powers. In this alternate timeline, Africa industrializes later than Europe, but much earlier than it did under colonial rule. City-states along the coast invest in modern ports. Inland empires build early rail lines to connect markets. Local industries grow to support regional demand. Economies remain diversified, not forced into monocrop systems designed for export. And without extractive colonial policies, wealth stays inside African states, supporting administration, education, and infrastructure. Trade with Europe and Asia continues, but on negotiated mutual terms. African states adopt new technologies at their own pace. They reform tax systems, expand agriculture, and modernize manufacturing without being reshaped for foreign interests. The result is a continent with stronger internal markets, more balanced development, and several middle-income regions emerging by the mid-20th century. Not to be the poorest continent on the planet as it is today. Not only that, several African regions could emerge as significant economic and political players, comparable not to superpowers, but to influential nations like Brazil, Turkey, or Indonesia, states that help shape their regions and the global agenda. Imagining an Africa without the scramble is not about changing history. It's about seeing the future that might have been. So here's the question: what might our world look like if Africa had written its own story from the start? If you found this journey interesting, feel free to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories that rethink our world.